and it's a special day in the weather departments across at least two communities. From Central Florida, I'm WESH 2 meteorologist Eric Burris.
And in Savannah, Georgia, I'm WJCL 22 Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson.
All right, so Jeremy, for those that are new to this, Jeremy is my partner in crime when it comes to tracking the tropics, and usually it's March the 1st. This year that was a Sunday, so we've delayed it a little bit, but we always put out our hurricane season forecast. We've done this for many years now. Jeremy, talk a little bit about why we put out our own hurricane season forecast.
We use all kinds of different factors when we create this, and we will be going over those. But one of the methods we use, we sort of dissect the weather pattern in the fall, and then that weather pattern starts to cycle. We pick out not only important features, we look at the cycle duration, we look at those other ingredients, and then we're able to put this out maybe a little bit earlier than some people would be able to imagine. But yeah, here we are every single year. It's right around March the 1st. We try to do it on the 1st. Last year it was February 28th. This year it is March 2nd. But yeah, we'll talk about the season ahead, some of the real important things we're looking at, and then we'll go over the final numbers.
Yeah, so I guess a good place to start is probably just by looking at the storm names this year, because that's an ever popular thing for everybody to look at. This year, the first name will be Arthur. Then we have Big Bertha, Cristobal, Dolly, Edward. Floridians that have been here for a while will remember Faye. That was a storm that made landfall like four times, dumped feet of water a couple of, a decade plus ago. Hannah, Isaias, I remember that one. Josephine, Kyle, Leah, Marco, Nana, Omar, Paulette, Renee, Sally, Teddy, Vicky, and Wilfred. But of course, Jeremy, you and I both know they're not here to see that. They're here to see some of our numbers. So maybe we start with with the seasonal numbers. What do you think?
Yeah, that's fine. And then we can kind of go from there. Yeah, so the season, an average is 14 name storms, seven hurricanes, three major hurricanes. So you can see our numbers there to the right, maybe a little bit below average this year in terms of name storms. Hurricanes, pretty close to average, at least the top number. And then major hurricanes, one, two, three. So when we come up with those numbers, again, we look at all kinds of different factors. The important thing, though, is that it just takes one storm impacting your area
Right.
with some direct impacts. It doesn't even have to be a ferocious hurricane, like you said. One of those names on the list came through your vicinity or area years ago, and it was a heavy rainmaker.
Right. So a lot went into these numbers. The first thing, we know that the overall pattern should try to trend back toward an El Nino pattern. And Jeremy, you and I both know an El Nino pattern essentially offers up typically a lower number of storms. But in addition to that, we also went through and did some what we call analoging, where we look at years that are very similar to what we're looking ahead to, and years that came from patterns that we are coming from to try and find some kind of correlative years. And Jeremy, I think we did a pretty good job. I was a little broader, and you kind of helped to get me focused a little bit, which is what you're very, very good at. But talk a little bit about the years that are very similar to what we're heading into, if you would.
Okay, and if you have the graphic, we can probably put this up so people can get a little visual of the current state of some of our sea surface temperatures, and then we can also discuss after that maybe some of the favorite storm tracks just based off the analog years. So we went all the way back to 1950 through the current day, and we're looking at sea surface temperatures for ENSO, which is basically La Nina, El Nino, or neutral states. ENSO is El Nino Southern Oscillation, so you can see it there on the map. So that's kind of the area we are pointing to. That blue right now, that's where we've had the La Nina, or cooler than average water temperatures in that equatorial Pacific area, so near the equator. And that's a long ways away from the Atlantic basin. But what can happen is some of our upper level winds can be impacted by those sea surface temperatures. So what we did is the last couple seasons, we've had sort of a weaker La Nina in place. In the forecast from NOAA in terms of sea surface temperatures, the ENSO is to go to a neutral state and then potentially 50% chance or greater, maybe peak or later hurricane season of headed towards an El Nino, which would be seeing some of those waters warm. So, with all that said, what Eric and I did is we went back from 1950 to current day and we found some analog years or similar setups, not only for the upcoming hurricane season, but it's almost like we looked at a 3-year stretch. We had 2024, 2025, and then the forecast ahead for 2026. So in that, we picked out 5 years that had very similar setups. We picked the years out, the analogs first. We did not kind of look at any of the data first,
Right. Right.
and then we went through all that, wrote down how many named storms, hurricanes, majors they had, and if you look at all those years combined, overall they were below average. And in terms of name storms, it was near eight, about 4.6 hurricanes and 1.2 major. The ACE was also below average. So every metric there, at least with that, is below average. But does it necessarily mean exactly what will happen this season? No, but
Right.
it is, again, a factor or ingredient in the numbers and the forecast we're putting out.
And what I think is fairly interesting is when looking at that, okay, when looking at all of those analogs, every one of them, you had mentioned it, but I think it's worth mentioning again. Every analog, every year past that we referenced, okay, had a below average hurricane season. So independently, just looking at the overall setup for, I mean, we sampled what, like 75 years worth of data there, didn't we, Jeremy?
Yeah.
So, I
Uh,
mean,
so the
go
so
ahead.
the one probably of those five, the one that was at least closer to average, especially considering it was so long ago. I think we have much better means and techniques to
Yeah,
pick out tropical systems now. So you can maybe get a tropical system that was way out in the Atlantic
right,
somewhere. That maybe a fish storm that now our satellite data we can get those named was 1963. That one had 10 named storms,
right.
7 hurricanes, 3 majors. So that was the highest of the five. The lowest that we came up with had 6 named storms, 2 hurricanes, and 1 major. There were 2 seasons in there, though, in our analogs that had 0 major.
And
So,
yeah,
which was kind of amazing. You look back at past years and you think, oh, everything has to be busy or active, but not necessarily the case. And again, just because you may have below average names, you look at last year, we had above average majors. So
right.
obviously, we'll see how the season plays out, but those are the numbers we were looking at. I think you're going to lead us into something that we found, at least with the analog years in terms of storm tracks, and then we'll start talking about the current pattern
Yeah.
after that.
Yeah, so using those analog years, then we went in and took a deeper dive in. Well, where did those storms go? And these are kind of the overwhelming pathways, if you will, for those years. And, it's one of those situations where nearly every season in those analogs lined up to this, Jeremy. And so there was a very clear, I don't want to say opportunity, but there was a very clear indication on where these types of atmospherics try to give. You've got the standard recurvatures, and then you've got those systems that kind of get trapped in the Caribbean and the Gulf and end up in the kind of Panhandle Big Bend area. So there were no, and in looking at those, there were no. I mean, there you had a little this or a little that, but those were the very clear pathways on those years.
Yeah, I mean, we went back and looked at all the storm tracks for the analog or pastures that we thought lined up in terms of sea surface temperatures. So that's what we're still talking about is kind of this ENSO connection and would it have an influence on this year? So this is again one factor, but as Eric mentioned, those tan areas were kind of the highways where if you look at those seasons as a whole, a couple of them really favored that maybe northern Caribbean to eastern Gulf, and then the others there were a lot of recurvatures.
Yes.
So generally, that green area as a whole for the analogs was favored. Now, does it mean you couldn't get something in like the central western Gulf? No,
Right,
there
right,
was maybe, as you mentioned, we found maybe like one little stray storm in a season or two. But what we're doing is trying to give you the most favored area. So it's not like it's a guarantee, but this was in looking at those past years, sort of the connection we were able to make.
right. All right. So that said, then, of course, everybody wants to know what did we track in this year? Now, for those that are new to the way that Jeremy and I forecast, we try to use all the tools in the tool chest. And one of the big ones is the idea that the weather cycles, and
Hmm.
that the idea that there's a new weather pattern that establishes itself, basically kind of fall and then recycles over and over and over again. And, I'll be the first to tell you that it's not perfect. No forecasting the future is perfect, okay?
Right.
I think Phil Klotzbach is really, really great at saying, like, long range forecasting is humbling. That said, though, we can use these teleconnections and we can leverage this information to try and give you an idea of where these storm systems went. So, Jeremy, I think is probably a pretty good idea to just kind of show the big storm systems, the big features that we were watching during October, November, December, kind of that establishing time period.
Yeah, and like you said, we're going to use any means possible to come up with our forecast. And I think it is undeniable. If you go back and look at, I believe this is our sixth year of doing this.
Yeah,
At the previous five, we have had some really incredible hurricane season forecasts that were put out around March the 1st
right,
each and every year. So
right.
this isn't just a one-off thing here where we're trying something new. We certainly have a track record with our hurricane season forecast. So with that said, you look at some of those lows and where they were during the fall and maybe even slash early meteorological winter.
Yeah.
We sort of came up with this right now with some of the lows that really piqued our interest. And of course, the one we did include that one down there, which was late October. That was Hurricane Melissa. So
Yep.
that is something that was squarely in the new pattern that we watch. So that is something come this hurricane season. It's not saying Jamaica would see another direct impact from a tropical system, but it is sort of in that Caribbean area
Right.
into the Southwest Atlantic that we would be watching. And when you look at the lows here, they kind of all start to line up just with the analog ENSO that we pointed out. So
Yep.
we're starting to get a very good idea here with all the factors that we took a look at. So, one thing that, and we can probably talk about this now since we have these up,
Yeah.
is as Eric alluded to, we're trying to pick out the cycle duration, which we have some ideas about, but our ideas are that it is longer this year. So, we
Yeah.
have a longer cycle duration. So, what we're kind of trying to do is gain a little more confidence. So,
Right.
what at this time, we're not going to be putting those future dates on those because in past years we probably had at least three cycles where we it's like clues we gain confidence and then we'll
Right.
be able to project forward. Could we project forward right now? I think so, but we still have a couple questions we want answered. So what we're going to do right now, we're going to show you some of those storms of interest.
Yeah.
We're going to keep really diving deep and analyzing this over the next month or so, and then as we get into spring, we'll have an update for you. So I think that's good. It'll give people something to look forward to.
Well, I think you're right. And I think that that also hammers home the idea that this is not just a happenstance forecast that we put out because the calendar says March. We put a lot of work into it to ensure that we've got the level of accuracy that we expect from ourselves. And so, Jeremy, you and I have talked a lot about cycle duration. And we've gone back and forth on honestly what to do because as long as we've been doing this, this is going to be the first year that we don't put the recurring dates out, at least on the 1st of March or the 2nd of March. And I think that, for you and I, we temporarily struggled with that, but we are just not there because of it being a longer cycle duration. We're just not to the level of confidence that we want before we put that out.
Right, and I think that is that's not only fair to us, but it's very fair to everyone that joins us each and every week. So we will be having many, many more thoughts before the season arrives. So don't worry about that. We're still basically 3 months from the start of hurricane season. Sometimes we get those early storms in May, but I think we should have a pretty good idea before that. So we'll be able to add those thoughts in. But when you look at the map you're talking about right now, we can still give you our hotspots. So
Right.
we've seen enough of the pattern, the cycle, the other ingredients, the factors, everything that we were able to put the numbers together, give you an idea of some of the important lows that we're watching, the analog storm tracks, and now the landfall hotspots. So these are areas that have a higher than average chance of seeing a tropical system or direct impacts this upcoming 2026 hurricane season. So these were the areas we have highlighted right now, and I'll let you kind of talk about the location of those.
Yeah. So basically following the idea of kind of those patterns that we had looked at just a couple of moments ago, right? The idea is that there's going to be some momentum from the Gulf, from the Caribbean to the Gulf into the kind of panhandle, Big Bend area. And then these recurvatures, we've seen enough of these storm systems during the winter months to kind of scrape up along the shoreline there. So we're thinking, the North Carolina, South Carolina corridor being another kind of hot spot there. But I think the biggest struggle usually we'll have one landmark event where once that landmark event comes back around, it's easy to put it together like a sandwich. Because we haven't really had that one landmark event, we know where the pieces of the puzzle are going. We just don't exactly know how often they're coming around. We think that it's that longer duration, as you mentioned, Jeremy, and
Hmm.
thus that's going to be a contributing factor to a lower overall count in storms, add to the El Nino fact as well. So I think that we are, a lot of my viewers, Jeremy, have been saying, how far into the hurricane forecast are you in percentage? And I'd say overall, we're 75% there, maybe even 80% there. It's just a matter of dialing down that nitty gritty specific of how often it recycles.
Yeah. So along with that, the cycle and then the path the storms take. So what everyone thinks is, oh, I'm not in a hot spot. I'm don't need to watch anything. So is we're always very forthcoming with our forecast. Last year, we really thought the Gulf was an area that would see at least one impact.
Yeah.
It had none. It had none last year, and it ended up the one sort of weaker system was up along the Carolinas there just after the 4th of July or right around there. So it was good news for our coastline last year. So what you're looking at right now are our forecast hotspots, which have above average chance of seeing some sort of impact.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of what we're watching this year. And do you have any questions coming in? Someone was
Yeah.
asking this, and I can maybe let you discuss this.
Yeah.
How many hurricanes will Florida get this year? And I think maybe this person hopped on just sort of after we started.
Yeah.
But if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so we kind of had already discussed the numbers, but we'll pop that one back
Mhm.
up. The idea is the overall number of hurricanes we're forecasting is going to be a little below average, we think, given an El Nino onset, given kind of a longer cycle duration. We're thinking that this year is going to be just a little quieter than the average. And to which I also have to say, there are people that'll say they'll never forecast a below average season, and we're at or slightly below average depending on which metric you look at. So, how many are going to hit Florida? It's not that easy when we look at kind of the pathways of systems, given the historical analogs and the like, given the pathways of systems that we've watched during this winter time. I mean, I would say that the kind of Tampa Bay up through about Apalachicola is going to be an area that we're going to have to watch. The Gulf is going to get warm. There'll be, I would think, probably more homegrown systems that would threaten the United States versus the recurvatures that would want to stay off the shoreline. But again, until we get an idea of true cycle duration, we're not going to be able to hammer down dates as much.
Yeah, and also sort of the big wild card is, are we going to get a lot more dusty, dry air coming in? Last year, I felt like for about 2 months it was just plaguing the
Yep.
Atlantic basin, which overall, that is very good news. That helped to suppress tropical development for an
Yep.
extended period of time. Maybe not keeping our numbers down by a couple last year, but sometimes that dusty, dry air is something that um, is more of a wild card for us.
Well, I would also add, that's one wild card that we just can't forecast. It's not a part of our forecast package. And so what that ended up doing is that ended up really suppressing the tropical development. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, um, um, because of that, the systems that developed did what they did. But the parts of the pattern that you and I had in our hurricane season forecast, even though they didn't hurricane, we didn't get hurricanes moving those areas, there were still pieces of energy and still storm systems that were moving through those areas. So, even though they didn't, develop it tropically because of all that dusty, dry air, I still consider the bones of our forecast last year to be very, very successful.
Yes, and then probably the most successful part was that the above average major hurricanes, because we ended up with five, or I mean, the category fives. We ended up with three category fives and then four major hurricanes.
Yeah, yeah. So, I would say that all in all, the forecast, we've had very good success. It's not been full 100% success, but that's just the way that it goes. But I've been very, very happy with where we are. Jamie Lopez is
Mhm.
asking, is the late nor'easter a result of the lows off South Carolina, North Carolina, or is that a standalone? Jeremy, I'll let you handle that one.
I think that's something we have to watch, and I may end up putting a line in or a mention. We usually try to kind of focus on the U.S. coastline. I think this may be one of those seasons because we did notice some of those nor'easters, and then they got very close to some of those Canadian provinces or maritime areas. This might be a season where you see some of those nor'easter type things where they end up weakening. Maybe it's subtropical, it's a remnant low, it's extratropical, something like that as it cruises off to the north northeast. So yeah, that was a pretty very very impressive cyclone that we had there.
Yeah.
That nor'easter here recently. So I think that is something that is at least worth watching because that energy started down closer to the southeast coast or off from it.
Right. All right. So Debbie's asking longer duration. What is that now? So, I think we've seen over the years, we've seen durations in the 40s, we've seen durations in the 50s, but we're struggling at the moment to really key in on that. So maybe Jeremy, that's a good question to kind of discuss a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been using LRC for like 20 years. I first learned about it in Kansas City. I've used it in the Midwest. I've used it for tropical forecasting. I mean, you can use it anywhere. So we've identified our important features, and now kind of the final part of that is you pick out the duration or sort of that time frame that these highs, lows, the waves cycle across the globe in the northern hemisphere. So,
Yeah.
like as Eric mentioned, we've had years where the duration may have been in the 40s, so things come around a little bit quicker. In the 50s, maybe you wait a little bit longer, but we think this one could be even longer than that. So that's why we haven't been able to get as many looks at the cycle
Right.
this year. So, but we've been able to pick out fairly confidently where we think the important features are at.
And I think you had, by mentioning we haven't gotten as many looks. That's the big thing. That's why you don't have dates yet, if honest, because maybe we've gotten two cycles, maybe we've gotten a cycle and a half. We usually get about 2 to 2.5 good cycles before we get here. Thus, it gives us that opportunity for the confidence level. And I think that Jeremy, right there, is why we're not putting the dates out just yet because we're not quite to the confidence level we'd like to be at.
Yeah, and then another question that came in here was any way to calculate intensity of hurricanes from the past month cycle or looks. Well, one thing that going back to what you said maybe 5, 10 minutes ago is like a signature storm. Is there something that really jumped out at us during fall or maybe early winter? In past years, I would say yes, like hurricane season 2024, I think it was when we had Debbie and Helene, we had a very good indication that that eastern third of the Gulf and the time frame of that, and that we absolutely nailed that
Yeah.
forecast, and that was multiple systems right in our time frames. Well, what I would say now is I think my interest is really peaked to see what happens with we could term it maybe that Melissa part of the pattern
Right.
where you have more of the high above it. Is something going to develop down anywhere in that vicinity this hurricane season? So that was clearly the strongest thing that we had
Yeah.
um, last fall. So that is something that has piqued our interest. It is tough though to see those little lows that then turn into these big
Right.
hurricanes in the winter months because
That's the
you don't have
struggle.
the protective necessarily upper level winds down there. You can have stronger winds, so that low may be disguised
Right.
or not really formed.
And we have to also look for where they kind of peak out. That's a big
Hmm.
one. They could develop, but where are they strengthening? There's all those little signatures there. So the Melissa part of the pattern I think is going to be the biggest one. We want to be able to get that looked at again as best as we can. And Also understanding that the up you had mentioned, the upper level lows and the protection. Also, though, like the seasonal transition into spring and fall, or spring and
Hmm.
summer, that shifts everything around, and so we kind of have to take that into account as well. So, this it would be so nice if there was a huge weather event, a truly signature part of the pattern. One thing that I've been looking at is like our flash flooding event here in Florida, and you and I, Jeremy, were talking about that just a couple
Hmm.
of days ago, trying to find the recycles of that, because going back to like Ian and Nicole, that was a big way that I was able to look at flooding event and look back and see that Volusia, for example, had a massive flooding event, the 9 months prior to the flooding hurricane that moved through.
Yeah. It's all clues, and it's a lot of work behind the scenes that people don't see. Sometimes I think people just say we have thrown things out there trying to get clicks. I That is not it at all.
No.
This is like a passion for us, and we love tropical forecasting. We feel like we have a method that can really give us an advantage of
Yeah.
forecasting the tropics. So that's why we do it, and it's just to inform everyone. And we're here the entire hurricane season, every Tuesday.
Yes, yes. So to that point, Jeremy and I work together. We have done so for a great many years. Every Tuesday, we track the tropics during hurricane season at 10 a.m. right here on all of the social channels. And hopefully it'll be a quiet year, but even if it's a quiet year, we are still going to be dialing into the data. And I think now more than ever, Jeremy, I think what you and I can do is look at all of the data, just as so many of these hype mongers do, but we can
Right.
give the perspective of college education and the perspective of people that have lived, breathed, and tracked these things for decades and decades. And I think that in a world where there's so much noise, let us be the kind of calm, I don't want to say silence, but that calm voice of reason in an otherwise hypey, scary time of life.
Yeah, we're not taking a look at a model that goes out 2 weeks and just taking the last frame of it that shows something scary and posting it and saying, "Hey, look out for this," and then
Right.
6 hours later it's gone. We're putting the time in. We're really diving into the pattern. What we want to do is give everyone our sort of our best estimate of what is going to be happening for the upcoming hurricane season, and we're here for the duration. It's a 6 month marathon.
It is a marathon and not a sprint. So at some point here in the next couple of months, we'll be continuing to dial down as best we can, and we'll put out we'll call it an update where we'll throw some dates on there and give you guys the more detailed forecast that once we get to the point where we're confident we can deliver that. I would say that's probably when that happens, Jeremy. You and I'll have to discuss, but we'll get there.
Right. Yeah. And if we want to just wrap things up here, throw the
Yep.
numbers up one more time in
Yep.
case someone is just joining us. And it's always it's always a fun time when we get to around March 1st. We love talking tropics. I am 1000% over winter. I mean, we had back-to-back years where it snowed here in Savannah. So
Gross.
yes, we are more than ready for this to be winter to be over. So as we look ahead to spring into summer, those are the numbers that we have out for hurricane season.
I like the idea of a lower than average season. Let's hope that that's what ends up being delivered. So,
Yeah.
all right. From sunny Central Florida, thanks for joining us. I'm WESH 2 meteorologist Eric Burris.
All right, and if you could, everyone just share this forecast with your friends and family. They can, if they have questions, reach out to Eric or myself, and we are happy to help from Savannah, Georgia. I'm WJCL 22 Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson.
Jeremy, we'll see you and I plenty, and then everybody can hang out with us